Thank you again, everybody, for joining this webinar. This is going to be a very fun and exciting one. My name is Richard Harris. I am from Sales Hacker. I'm the Director of Sales Training and Consulting over here. It's my pleasure today to talk about women in sales today at a very high level. I think it's a great topic to speak about, something I'm fairly passionate about. I've actually written about it and interviewed a lot of women about being a woman in sales. And so I think it's going to be a very, very fun subject to discuss. Before we jump into the details, I do want to remind everybody we are recording this, so if you missed something or if you think there's someone in your organization that needs to maybe check in and listen in on a couple of things, it'll be coming out your way. Also, feel free to go to the chat box. Introduce yourself. Tell us your name, the name of your company, how long you've been in sales, just something about you. We try to make this an interactive session. It's not just about these talking heads, although I seem to be doing a lot, and I promise that'll stop in a moment. So please introduce yourselves. Questions, please bring your questions as we go. We think this is going to be an exciting topic and certainly one that presses some buttons, and we think that a good discussion is a discussion. Silence for something like this is not what we're looking for. So without going any further, I want to introduce our panelists, many of whom I've known for years now. It's a lot of fun to work with friends and colleagues. So first I want to introduce Jen Spencer from Allbound. Jen and Allbound are revolutionizing the way channel sales works. It's a very broken process, and they've got an amazing SaaS platform. So if you're looking for that kind of thing and you're running channel sales, go there. They've also got a great resource center if you're trying to figure out what to do with your channel sales. Prior to being at Allbound, she was the Director of Marketing at NetTime Solutions and a Marketing Manager at TTI Success. She's also an alumni of the University of Arizona, my alma mater as well, so bear down. Sorry about that NCAA tournament challenge this year. That was a bummer. Yeah. Also, another person who I've just gotten to know so well over the last few years is Lori Richardson. And if you don't know her, you should know her. You'll be glad to know her now that you do. Her organization, Score More Sales, has been helping SMB and mid-market companies find the problems in their sales team. Like literally not only finding it, but then helping you fix it in a way that I would describe as sort of organic and natural, so it doesn't feel like a major disruption. She's very good at listening and making sure things come out the right way, the way you want them to do. She also has founded, I guess, Lori, and you can correct me in a minute, Women Sales Pros, which is a group that is trying to significantly support women in the sales industry. I think we all know that there's just not enough of them. There's a lot of great ones out there, but we'd sort of like to see more and see a more balanced effort across the board. Last thing I would say, Lori, I know you've got a book coming out August 31st. What's the title?
Yes, it's called She Sells, She Leads.
All right, sweet. All right, well, I'm going to read it even though I'm a guy because I think there's a lot to learn from different people regardless of their gender. So just because it has a she in a title doesn't mean we can't all read it. Next, we have Tonni Bennett, who is the VP of Sales at Terminus. I've gotten to know Tonni the last few years through the Sales Hacker arena. Also worked with her team over at Terminus, and it's been so fun watching Tonni build this team and work on this team and grow this team and make it the success that it is over at Terminus. Reminds me of many things, and without dating myself, my early stages of my sales career. And I can tell you you're doing it better than I ever did. So Tonni, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is Amit Bendov, I think, who is the co-founder of Gong, who is our host. Gong is, for lack of a better word, is revolutionizing the ways sales coaching and training can occur. It can happen in real time. It allows you to hear the real conversations, figure out what are the things that are working, what isn't working. And the other cool thing about something like a tool like Gong is that marketing can now hear the whole sales conversation. Product engineering could hear the whole sales conversation. So it's really, while they focus on sales, there's so many benefits to something like that. So I'll now stop with the plugs, but I feel like everybody deserves their shot. Our agenda today, while we are going to talk about women in sales, we are going to talk first just, talking about gathering data at a high level, right? There's been this study that came out. I think Gong was the producer of this study after analyzing 30,000 calls. And we're going to talk about what that data means. The other thing we're going to talk about is what makes someone successful, regardless of gender. there are certain attributes that are good for all people that are not gender related. So we don't want this to just be about gender. And then we are going to discuss some of the differences we see in here. Like at some point, we have to acknowledge that there is a difference. And I know if anybody from HR is listening, go ahead and hang up now because you probably won't want to hear all these conversations. But there are great strengths that everybody brings to the table regardless of their gender. But there are also trends we see in other places too. So it's worthy of having that discussion. So as we go through this webinar, our goal is to focus on the best quality of any good sales rep and then see if there's things that, because of gender, also help that. So the goal is to really talk about the quality of a sales rep and then see if gender plays a role as opposed to just determining if it's a role-based situation. I know we lost Lori's visual, but I know she's on audio, so bear with us.
I am here.
Oh,
Yes,
there you go. All right.
I'm here.
One of the things we do want to make sure is that we have no intention of making a blanket gender bias statement, right? There are certain things that we have. We all bring our own prejudices based on who we are, based on our gender, our backgrounds, whatever it is. So our goal is to not to try and fall into those biases, but we do know that they can exist. So please, everybody, let's be wise, let's be smart, let's share intelligence, but also recognize that it's not meant to be a personal attack on anyone. So let's go with the first question, really. Amit, I think this is for you. Can you talk to us a little bit about this conversation data that was gathered by you? Tell us a little bit about the data in case people haven't read the report.
Yeah, so what triggered that data analysis is I think we read a post that got a lot of popularity about, and I think it argues something like women are better than men in sales, and it has like 11 points why, and there are also posts that might argue otherwise, and we said, okay, can we get some data behind it, because they're all like valid argument, but there's very little facts, and we wanted to know first, can we, is there any data that supports that women are better, and if so, are there any differences in the way that's being done? And that's what we decided to run. So we try to compare apples to apples, and I would qualify, it's not necessarily, we didn't even like measure actual sales, but conversion rates from initial demo discovery call, so we can have everybody on a level playing field. And we analyzed some 30,000 calls. Calls are being transcribed, analyzed, and also the call dynamics are being analyzed. So talk time, number of interactions, speaker changes, disruptions to the customer, how much the customer is speaking, how much the salesperson is speaking, and then we compared a lot of parameters between male and female sellers. I'd also say that most of the data is from B2B, all of the data is from B2B companies, a lot of technology companies, similar types of sales cycle around 60 days. So we tried, that's why we have a lot more data, but try to narrow it down to a data set that actually allows comparison, more or less about the same number of men versus women call, a little more in a male, but I mean the sad fact is that women are underrepresented in the workforce, and sadly sometimes even are underpaid. So what we found actually that women's sales at least as good, okay, if not better. Okay, so the conversion rates, at least from the early stage, which is what we've tested, are better, and that's statistically significant, 10% better conversion, which is very substantial. If you calculate what it means to your top line, it's huge, but the numbers are small.
I mean, when you say conversion, are you talking about conversion from, hey, this is a lead to a first appointment, from a first appointment to a qualified opportunity? Can you just share a little bit about what you mean by conversion in this particular part of the study?
All right, so it's from the first call with an account executive, okay, which is usually either a discovery or a demo or a combination of both, okay? It's not the SDR call setting appointment. These are substantial conversation, usually around 45 minutes on average, a lot of meat on the bone. So these are real conversations, and we measure how many move from that point to the next stage of the opportunity, okay, whatever it is, trial, commercials. So that's conversion.
Great. Great. What are the, and I'll sort of throw this out to the group, and we'll sort of let it be a free-for-all, right? What are the 3 to 4 things that you see successful teams are doing to help reps have better conversations? I don't care if it's whether the rep is a male or a woman, but let's just define good best practices. Lori, I know you see a lot of teams, so maybe I will start with you first. What are the things that you're seeing from a success standpoint?
Well, I apologize for losing my video here, but I'm in a hotel, so we have a slow connection, so you'll just have to hear my voice. We are, what I think what it boils down to is having people who can talk to a customer about their business and about their business issues, and they can add insight. So, I think that those are really good starting points.
And when you say a business issue, can you define that? Because I know there's a difference between sort of surface pain and real pain. Anything sort of come to mind that you can sort of drill down on?
Well, certainly being able to, we call it peeling back the onion. When people start talking to you or you're able to engage in a conversation, being able to ask questions that will get to a little deeper level of conversation, and that happens through understanding their business.
Yep.
So if I can relate to something in their industry, and I think that that's the biggest challenge, is that a lot of companies, certainly not the ones represented on the call today, but I think a lot of companies are putting people out on the phones too soon and sending emails that are mass emails, and they're just ruining their first opportunity to build a great impression.
Yeah. So Jen and Tonni, I'll let you guys decide, but you two are the practitioners, right? Compared to the 3 of us, although Amit might run part of the sales team, much to his sales manager's chagrin. But the 2 of you are the practitioners. You're running a sales team. You're overseeing salespeople. What are the things that you're seeing, or what are the things you're doing to make your reps have better calls?
I think the number one thing that we really focus on is relevance, like being relevant and doing your homework. So, and today, when we have access to so much from a technology perspective, from a social media perspective, we should never be going in blind into any conversation. And today's buyer, that person you're on the phone with or you're interacting with via email, expects that you have gathered as much information as possible and that you're prepared to have a conversation that's going to be relevant to that individual. And, so putting the focus on them versus putting the focus on yourself, even though your goal is ultimately to book a meeting with them or, to engage in a sales conversation.
Yeah, and to take a slightly different approach to the question, I think what Jen and Lori said, totally agree. I think big picture, what we're trying to do to empower our reps to have better conversations is really putting a lot of emphasis on coaching and making sure that we're having set times that aren't negotiable. We're not going to be pulling together a meeting where we sit down, work with each rep individually, and dig into coaching. And what that means for us is it's not deal coaching, what are your top accounts, how can I help, but really listening to calls or being on calls live and then talking through that. And so we have different frequencies for different people on the team depending on their tenure and their performance, but what we're looking at is first the quantitative numbers. How do you rank compared to the team? What are your conversion rates or your batting average? Does there seem to be a significant difference in the number of first meetings you can get to second meetings? Or, where in the funnel does it look like you might be having a challenge? Let's focus there, and let's listen to some calls to really understand what you're doing. And diving in there, and then making sure to give only 1 or 2 key pieces of feedback at a time so that we're not overwhelming the rep with all the things that could be doing better. But let's start here. We really need to work on your discovery, for instance. It seems like you're not really engaging the prospect which is making you feel awkward, so you're skipping into the demo, but you're unable to do a good demo because you don't really understand their challenges. So here's how you can not only ask better questions, but kind of the tone or the pace you might want to use to get more responses.
That's great. That's really solid. I think that I'm glad to hear about the coaching thing. And the one thing I'll put out there for people on the phone, there's a difference between a one-on-one and a pipeline meeting. So often I see managers saying they do one-on-ones, but they turn into, as Tony described it, as deal coaching. Well, that's not really a one-on-one. A one-on-one, I think, one aspect of a one-on-one is what Tony's talking about, this career development, this professional development, to listen to a couple of calls. And that's the thing that I think will significantly move the needle for everybody. I've got 2 kids, and I can promise you that the more time I spend with my kids, the better they behave, right? It's a little bit like management. The more time you invest into your sales reps, the better they're going to be. It's not about being a behavior issue, but it is about giving them the attention. We got a great question that sort of came in, and I think it sort of piggybacks off of what Jen said. Jen, what if you are making a bunch of calls with trial users and you don't have a lot of time to do this sort of analysis, right, where you do have this, there are times where, yes, you can do that deep analysis for your targeted accounts, but here's this other list of people we just need to get in touch with. What do you recommend there in that kind of a situation? And again, I'll let maybe start with Tony on this one, because I know you run into this a little bit, and then switch it back over to Jen.
Yeah, so you're just asking if someone has, say, a more transactional sale and they don't have time to dig deeper, what can they do?
Exactly.
So I think there's a couple of things. Certainly every sale is different. The bigger the deal value, the more important, I shouldn't say the more important discovery is, it's always important, but certainly the more time you want to invest there. But no matter what the sale, it definitely is important to understand as much as you can about what they want to accomplish. So one tactic that we use is if the person's like, okay, I just want to see the product, or trying to brush you along, find ways throughout the conversation to ask questions. You don't have to have a discovery and then a demo or a presentation. They can all just be intertwined. So maybe I start by saying, well, hey, at a high level, we do X, Y, and Z. With that in mind, tell me a little more about what you're doing for that today. And they tell you, cool, so in a little bit more about the product. We can help you do X, Y, and Z in this way. Speaking of which, how does this work? So finding ways to ask questions throughout the process, and then, of course, knowing how much discovery is needed based on the complexity of your sale.
Yep. Jen, you have something to add on that?
Sure. I think in this kind of situation, the other thing that I would want to know is, okay, well, where are these prospects coming from, right? And what demand gen efforts are you using to attract those people? And hopefully you've identified who those buyer personas are and what those ideal customer profiles are. And so you can coach your team on how to communicate with that type of persona in that type of industry. So maybe you don't have time to dig into their LinkedIn profile, look at their company website, but at a glance, you should be able to put them in, one of 3 or 4 buckets if you are, taking a targeted approach to your demand generation. And that'll at least get you like 50% of the way there, so that you can then continue to do what Tony's recommending.
Yeah. I'd want to add one other thing. If there's information that needs to be gathered from research, having your SDRs doing that research is not the best use of their time. If you need to have their website or their LinkedIn profile up for that person, well, someone needs to go put that information in your database, right? Just some basic things like that will help you make those calls faster, so you can do that research faster. Asking SDRs to do basic research, or AEs to do basic research, in my opinion, is a huge time suck. Lori or Amit, anything you'd like to add on this one about this?
Yeah, so one thing we've done at a previous company, we actually, so first we understood what is it we're looking for in the research. Over time, you develop a sense of what are the 4 or 5 things that you really want to know about the prospect to start the conversation. And then we hired a bunch of students part-time that would go and look for these specific questions at every company, so you'd get a profile. These are relatively low-cost ways of doing that, and my advice, always do it. Even if you can afford 5 minutes, it sure beats nothing. So always come prepared. And if you could do it on a scale with low-cost people, you could offshore I mean, there are lots of people who would do anything for $5 right now.
Yep. No, I think that's great. Well, let's move forward. Lori, did you have anything to add? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I like what Jen was talking about, a targeted approach, and I think it's much easier to add value when you're focusing on certain personas.
Yep, I completely agree. Let's move forward on the next question, which is, what are the skills that you're coaching or seeing more frequently these days? Like at a super high level, right? What are you looking for? I don't know. How about Jen? You want to take that one first?
Sure. So what are we looking for sorry, just to clarify, in a new hire or with a current salesperson?
Both. I think it could be answered both.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like in a new person, it's definitely coachability, I think, is one of the most important things. But with our current sales team, something that we're very focused on has to do with listening. And this is where, when you look at like the study and looking at how much people were listening, that what a technology like Gong can do, right, is tell you when someone wasn't talking, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's telling you that person was actually listening and actually hearing not just what is being said by your prospect, but also what's not being said. And that's been an area that we're very focused on, is listening to even what's not being said and understanding the context of the conversation more. And that's proven there's a bit of an art in that we're focusing on right now.
Lori, what are you seeing, as those skills, as you work with different teams? Where do you see this happening? What do you see happening?
The biggest skills are communication skills and, building on what Jen was saying, emotional intelligence. So the ability to hear something that may not be said, but may be present. And it's something that can be taught, although people have various levels of emotional intelligence. And I think the best coaches are helping their salespeople with ideas on how to listen better. And that is very critical. Coachability is very critical too.
Yep. I loved your line about something that wasn't said but was present in the conversation. I think that's a huge way to tell if you're a good listener. Asking that's a really powerful statement.
Yeah.
There's one of mine, in addition to everything I've said, it's not the top one, but something that I'm is finding recently is teaching people to relax. Just relax on call. Just I find it a lot of anxiety. Okay, it's a very tense situation. You have 30 minutes and you have a shot, you either convert or you don't. And then all of a sudden the prospect says something, you think you know where they're going, or they brought up an objection, or they told you that your product isn't really interesting, and then you automatically get very emotional and you start to go like on a long and winding story. Says, hey man, relax, just listen, take a pause, deep breaths, it's all good, have a quality conversation, enjoy the ride. You'll have much better answers. And we're considering starting calls with a drink.
Or a shot, right? Exactly. How about you, Tonni? What are you seeing? What are you coaching on skill-wise?
Yeah, what skills are you coaching on? It varies so much. It totally depends on the rep. But we sell to marketers. Marketers don't really like to be sold to, not that anyone does, but actually compared to other audiences, they tend to shy away from someone who sounds too salesy. And so a lot of what we will coach on is not just what someone's saying, but goes back to what you were saying about maybe tone, making sure their approach sounds friendly and sounds consultative instead of salesy. And then a lot of what we're coaching is for effective certain things, such as discovery. A lot of our reps know, but they're not always really effective at asking questions in the most concise way they could ask the question. So how could you better ask a question to get the right information? And what are ways that you can get deeper? So for instance, we listened to a couple different reps side by side and found that one, or actually our top performer in the company, what he does differently than everybody else in discovery is he never just asks a question. He asks, I noticed on your website, is that the correct assumption to make? So he always, or usually starts the question with a statement of something he found out in his research instead of just, who do you sell to? Oh, it looks on your website like you sell to X. Is that accurate? And so we started coaching the rest of the team on that approach. It's working really well for Chris. He has the highest conversion rate from call 1 to call 2, and he gets more information out of the people with. So it varies, but we like to see what's working. The way that we decide where to coach is often what's working for one person, how can we make that effective for others of the team as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think we've heard all these things, which are tone and pace, right? Which I know Chris does really well over there. Empathy seems to matter. We've heard people talk about preparation, and I know the other things we look for are confidence. Unbeknownst to the panelists, from this question, I sort of came up with, I walked away with something I'm going to write about this in the next week, that I feel like there's 5 C's that we're looking for and that we're coaching for, whether you're interviewing them or coaching them on it. One is, does this person have courage? Do they have the courage to do the things that are tough, or say the right things at the right time? Do they have the confidence to say those things? I know everybody's talked about this. Lori, you mentioned it, coachability. And then consistency is the 4th one. Like, can they show patterns of consistency? The last one that I really sort of put in there that I think that matters, that I haven't heard people say, is compassion. If people have compassion, they can be empathetic. And I think Lori's point, some people are more compassionate than others. Sometimes you have to teach them to be compassionate. It's different all the time.
Richard?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add what I liked about Toni's response was she said, it really depends on the rep in terms of what to work on. And I think that's a very important takeaway, that leaders know that everyone has different gaps and different strengths. And so to do one blanket, training on something where you have varying degrees of expertise, I just don't think the best training happens that way anymore. I think it's much more micro-focused as reps need it.
Yep, I think that's great. Totally agree. One of the things that came out of the study, I want to sort of shift back to the study that Gong put together, which is, it said that women interrupted their prospects 50% more than men do. And again, the study also suggested, I want to say 11%, women were 11% more effective than men at a high level. I'd love to hear from the ladies. Do you think you interrupt people more? Do you think it's helpful? Like, this is a study, I don't know. I want to be respectful of it, but what do you think?
Actually, Richard.
Yeah, exactly. You waited too long. Too long.
I think something we talked about when we were prepping for this session, something that Lori mentioned is, and you mentioned at the beginning, is us making sure we're not overgeneralizing something about an entire gender. So I think this is a tricky question in that it's not fair to say resolutely what the answer is, but reasons could be. Often women sound like they're taking a softer tone, and so I think it can make it easier to interrupt someone and not sound rude. For instance, we were actually doing a coaching call with one of our reps, and we were talking about it among several people on the team. One of the guys on our team said, I just feel really bad interrupting people, but it's hurting my discovery because I'm letting them ramble on and on too much about something that's not relevant, but I don't want to interrupt them. And the female on our team, Amanda, stepped in and said, oh, well, if it's going to, harm the conversation, you just have to politely find a way to interrupt. And so I thought that was really funny given the conversation that we're having today. But, one thing may be that, one reason may be that it doesn't sound as rude. And then also, a lot of times if you hear women talking, my mom and her best friend, when they have conversations, they're constantly interrupting each other. There may be an element of many women communicate that way with their friends. It's hard
nurturing way to do it.
But yeah, it might be a trait that's a little bit more common in women.
Jen, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I love that Toni brought that up. I'm pointing at you. I'm pointing at the screen. This is hysterical. So yes, I totally interrupt people. I know I do. I'm sure I do. I know I do. But I think there's a difference between when we think about these calls and when this data was taken. Were we looking at discovery calls? Were we looking at where were they in the in that sales stage? And I know that speaking personally, if I'm on a call and we've already had discovery and we're just really talking about how this product is going to help them achieve their goals, and we're really digging in as a team, and we're looking at, okay, how is this going to work for you, for your company, for your current situation? It is collaborative. Now, on paper or in the cloud, I guess, it might look like I'm interrupting, but it's not a rude interruption. It's a collaborative. We are so in sync that we are finishing each other's sentences. And I think that women, to Toni's point, they just more naturally do that in their personal lives. And so that, I think it's very natural for that to extend into professional.
I think that's great because I've heard it's a collaborative buying process now. Nobody makes a decision in a vacuum. And I wonder if I think that's a great way to describe it. And I think that, to your point, statistically speaking, and I'm going to speak in generalizations, we know that women use more words than men. There's a ton of studies out there that say that. And I think that also to a degree, women have that collaborative process in their day-to-day life much more naturally. So it becomes much more natural in the business world, where oftentimes, particularly me, I try to follow a path. There's a linear path to where I'm going, and I try not to interrupt it. But I think that women do the same thing, but just in a different way. So I love how you talked about it from the collaborative standpoint.
I might add to that. We are socialized differently. Men and women are socialized differently. And so I know at least one, there are gender communication experts, and I'm certainly not one of them, but people will say that men speak to determine and achieve power and status. Women talk to determine and achieve connection. So it doesn't surprise me that might be the case, that women are interrupting. I interrupted a woman. I was moderating a panel yesterday, and someone in the audience was kind of going off on a tangent, and I interrupted her and was happy to do so. So definitely, I think I think a lot of times we might be trying to keep the conversation on the topic.
Got it.
Or moving the opportunity forward.
Amit, what's your experience being on the other side of the gender fence, right?
Well, I just wanted to point out that I didn't interrupt anyone here on the panel.
You were allowed to.
Thank you.
So I think the issue with interruption is not so much the buyer experience. What I often find when I coach reps and I listen to calls is, listen, he was about to tell you something very important, okay, and interrupted. Had you waited, let him finish, you'd get a lot more valuable information. I don't think people are offended that you interrupt them. I mean, you're managing the conversation and you're steering in the right direction. That's good and efficient use of the time. Now, if you already know what he or she are about to say, then that's fine. But if you're not listening carefully, you're interrupting, you're jumping too quickly with a response, that's bad interruption because you're missing out on key information that's being good. So maybe that's where the difference lies.
Yeah, there was a comment made around this on the question section that I just want to iterate. I assume that Tricia, you're a female by the name, but today's age, I don't want to always assume that, so I hope I got it right. But her comment was that women are used to interrupting, otherwise we run the risk of being ignored or not heard. And that goes back to something about how we're raising people, right? And I'm just curious, at different parts of your life, Jen or Toni or Lori, do you feel like that was something that drove you to be not aggressive, but that you were sort of felt like, well, if I don't say something, I'm not going to get my point across. Like, I've never felt that way, and I don't know if that's a guy thing or if it's, and because that's how guys were, raised, boys were raised, or if it's a girl thing, or if it's just some generalization we're thinking about. But I thought it was an interesting comment.
That depends. I'm sure for either gender, you can have a child who was one of 8 kids and felt like they always needed to, I don't know, speak up. So that's probably less a gender thing. However, I will say I've been lucky enough to work in really great companies where I have rarely felt treated differently because I was a female. I have friends in more traditional industries, not in tech, where it's extremely male-dominated, that do feel like she'll say something and then a man will interrupt her or say it in a different way, and he's credited with the idea. That's something that hasn't happened to me, but I do think in some industries that is a thing. And so many women in the workplace, I can't speak for all of them, may feel like I need to really chime in, back to, lean in. I need to lean in. I need to chime in. Otherwise, I'm going to be looked over. Especially if you're the only woman in the room, it's easy for the men in the room to carry on a conversation at times and leave that female out if she's not super assertive.
Tonni, I know you well enough to know that that would never happen in your world. You're going to make your voice heard. So,
Yeah.
and I'm glad for that. So. Jen, you're sort of nodding your head as Tony speaks.
Yeah.
Tell us.
I mean, I've never been a rule follower, so I think even as a child, I would always just jump in and tell everybody what for. But over the course of my career, I have had my ideas taken. I have had work I've done, rebranded under someone else's name. And I have had experiences where I've discovered that a colleague is making more money than I am, or has more equity in the company, or what have you, and because of being burned in those situations, it has made me much more aggressive. So I definitely have been taught that if I don't speak up, then that's kind of my own fault, right? So I think it had definitely, unfortunately, I've experienced it. I don't have that experience right now at Allbound, but I have had that experience. So it did impact me for sure.
Yeah, we know that in the boardrooms, this is an issue that women, get talked over a lot. So it's kind of interesting that it's opposite on the calls. I like it.
That's good. That's good. So let's sort of bring this sort of full circle, and actually, I actually want to do something. This is we're going off script for a second. So Tonni and Jen, perhaps for people earlier in their career, whether they're male or female, you have this experience, and I'm sure, Lori, you've experienced it too, where you probably felt that, or that something was taken. What do you wish you'd done differently?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. What do you wish you'd done differently? Thanks for interrupting. What do you wish you would have done differently?
I can't see any of you, so you have to realize that.
Sure. What would you do differently? What advice would you maybe give to somebody who might be listening to this call that's early in their career? It could be a guy, because a guy's still they're 20-something coming out of college, and they don't want to rock the boat too much, right? We're all sort of taught that. What advice would you give to those people?
I think for anyone, and I've said this to a lot of women that I've worked with and mentored, but I think it's true for anyone, especially in sales. I struggled with this early in my career. I was trying so hard to emulate the people around me, which were all older men, and talk with really big words and sound older. I was 23 in sales, working at a pretty corporate company. And what I found is that when I started being myself and being genuine and being who I was, that's when I suddenly had more success. So I think no matter who you are, people of any different gender, race, etc., have times where they feel like an outsider, whether they should or not. And just owning up to that, being you, letting your differences speak for themselves, that actually sets you apart as an account executive. If someone is getting demos from 10 vendors in the space, and there's something unique about you, whether you're the only female in the sale, or something about your personality or the way that you speak, that's going to make you actually stand out in a sale. And people can feel when you're not being genuine. So I wish I had learned that lesson sooner, because when I did, that's when my sales career really took off.
I think for me, what I wish I would have, I could go back, I wish I would have trusted my gut more. So there were times where I kind of had a feeling like I'm being taken here, you know, or like this, I feel something doesn't feel right, but I didn't do anything about it. And I was definitely onto something. So it's trusting that intuition and then raising your hand. So I think for a large part of the early part of my career, I thought if I do everything that I'm told I need to do and I do it well, I will be rewarded. You know, I will move from point A to point B, you know, and what I learned is that that's not necessarily the case. And so you have to be your own best advocate. I think that's true, regardless of your gender. I mean, yeah, like there are mentors who are going to help you along the way, but you got to be willing to just like jump in and make your voice be heard in a respectful way. But no one else is going to look out for you the way that you're going to look out for you.
My mother tells me all the time. So, Lori, anything to add based on your career? And Lori, you know, I please take this the right way.
Society, you can say it.
Society has changed more greatly, I think, for you and the amount of time you've been in your business. Amit, myself, the same way. Where we were in the 90s as business people versus where we are in the you know the 16s, right, in the mid-teens of the 20s.
Come on now.
You've seen a big, huge change, right? So any stories you can share with folks?
Well, I just want to say with women sales pros, I mean, I would like to not have to talk about this, about women and men in the future. I hope to work myself out of the label that I have about championing women, because I think I can speak for Jen and Tonni, and tell me if I'm wrong, to say we want to be recognized first as leaders and anything else secondly. And I know that's why there are a lot of people who say, well, why do you need a women's sales pros group, and why do you need a women's this and a women's that? But in fact, you know, there are still instances, and we still need to help support people to have more diversity in our sales teams, particularly in tech and SaaS and manufacturing distribution. So I know for me, the thing I was thinking about when Jen was talking was if someone has taken my idea, which did happen many times over my career, I would I would say something like, I'm glad that you liked my idea, I'm glad that worked, or have other people step up and speak up. And that's a really good thing, to build your network so that other people will speak up for you, because in the end, it doesn't matter if you do it or someone else does it. It's a great way to make things right.
I think that's great. I think the things that I took away from your discussion was, one, raise your hand, right? Whether, you know, privately, publicly, you know, let people know what you want to do and accomplish. But two, be authentic, right? Be your true self. Back to what Tonni said. Mm-hmm. Sort of going back to get back on track to what we're doing. So we've talked about all this stuff, and Lori, I think I know your answer, but I want to ask you this from the data point perspective, perhaps. You know, does it really mean women are better than men in sales? Does it really mean that?
Well, when I go to speak to young women about the career of sales, I'm definitely going to reference it. So from that standpoint, I'm all for it. I think that we will learn a lot more when we drill down qualitatively into actually what's being said in the conversations. But hey, I'll take the 11%.
Sure. Amit, does this mean, you know, you guys ran the study, you know, without getting yourself into HR trouble? Are you trying to hire more women?
Desperately trying. We just don't have enough. Our percentage is way low. When I started a company, my wife had a conversation. She says, like, you know, I just hope that the first female that you hire is not going to be an admin or something like that. So we have researchers, we have data scientists, we have marketing automation. I always had female VP sales at previous companies and directors, and we're hiring. Raise your hands. Just contact me. We're actively hiring.
That's great. One of the things that I read an article, I don't know if people have read it, I think I've shared it with a couple of people in this group, is that it also goes back to the job description, right? How you write the job description, the words you choose and use have male and female annotations in them, right? Whereas I think to some extent things like quota crusher often has a different tone than a collaborative team environment, right? And so there's definitely some data out there that suggests that even look at your job descriptions to see how they're written and see what happens on the applicants you get. So.
And even more than that, the benefits of the position, we're going to write a blog post about our new maternity policy, and that's something in every company that I've gone to, even though I don't yet have children, I've asked about. And one time my husband said, well, why would you ask? What if the CEO or the manager thinks that means you want to have a kid and they don't hire you? So, well, if that's the way they see things, I don't want to work there. But I think in our market here in Atlanta, Marketo has an almost exclusively female sales team, and Salesforce.com has a lot of female reps. I don't have very many, and obviously I'm a female sales leader. I think part of it, too, is about perceived risk. And again, I'm somewhat making a generalization, but often women have to think more about family. They've got other things on their mind, whether they should or not, that they're thinking about, and they tend to pick positions where they know they're going to be taken care of as they have a family. And then especially for those who already have children, I know a couple girlfriends of mine who are sales leaders and they're already moms. They will only go to a company where they would let you take, 3, 4, 5 months off for maternity leave and things like that. So companies that are flexible. And so I think an early stage startup, not just a sales position, but just being an early stage startup, that could also have something to do with it. So there's a number of things that can go into whether or not, recruiting women is easy for you.
Mm-hmm. I would love to have someone review our job posting and see what we can change to make it more attractive to female candidates. I didn't even think about that.
I'd be happy to look at that.
Yeah, thank you, Lori.
There's a great story I'll share with my mom. It's not a great story. It's a reality story. My mom is in sales business all my life, and she wants. I was asking her about being a woman in sales in the 80s, right? And she said that at one point her boss looked at her and said in the interview, "You're not going to have any more children now, are you?" Like in the interview, and it's like it's like you're like they actually thought they could say that? Like, you got to be kidding me! Like, holy shit! Like, that is like unheard of. So yeah, and I still think it's there subtly. Like I think, and I'm glad, Tonni, you brought it up and said something, because it matters.
Yeah, I worked at a time where I was taken off an account because I was a single mom and because my male counterpart could travel more easily. So I left and I took the account.
Good
so
for you.
Talk about being aggressive.
Exactly.
Forget lawsuits, right?
Exactly.
Pick the business.
Just hurt them where it really hurts, right? So,
yeah, and then they went bankrupt, by the way.
Yeah. There you go. Excellent. We got about 10 more minutes left. It's been a fun conversation so far. I do want to remind the audience, if you have any just sort of questions about this, we'd be happy to throw them in. What advice do any of you have? I've got advice, but and Amit, you may have some. But what advice do men need to know about working with women in sales these days? Like, we're so, particularly here in California, it's so litigious. If we say the wrong thing or look the wrong way, we've been beaten in California to just like ignore it, right? But how do you also approach it from a positive perspective, right?
Richard, if I could go first, for me, it's not about men and women. It's just the fact that sales jobs require more analytical skill and advanced selling now, and we're very short on finding excellent candidates for sales professional roles. So from my standpoint, just looking in more unique places and different ways to find good candidates will probably add more women to the mix. And so for me, I think it's just important to widen your net and don't be just looking for athletes, for example, or some other stereotypes about who the best candidates are, and widen the net so that you can have a more diverse and interesting and creative work sales team that actually grows revenue.
That's great. I couldn't agree more.
And to the question of advice to give to men about working with women in sales, for the most part, it's just treat people like you should treat people. I don't think there's anything really that special. I do think there's a little bit of being sensitive, especially if you're on a team that's predominantly male and there's only one female. I would say the only thing there is if you're a guy on a team of 10 males and 1 female, be sure you don't do things like ask every single one of those males if he wants to go to lunch with you. When all of them say no, you don't ask the female. I mean, simple things like that maybe you want to pay attention to, and somewhat being careful about what you say. But for the most part, if you're a professional person acting like a professional at work, you should just treat everybody else with respect, and I don't think there's a really big difference.
My advice is not to make any assumptions. So one of the things that's really ticked me off over the years is when people would make assumptions. I have twins. They're now 13 years old. You know, when they were younger, I was still working, traveling, working a lot of nights, weekends, and people would say to me, "Wait, where are your children?" You know, and I got so irritated at one point. I'm like, "Oh, the cat's watching them." You know, like, what do you mean? You know, if I was a man standing here, would you ask him where his children are? Like. So you know, to Tony's point, it's like be a human being, but you know, don't make assumptions. Don't assume I can't travel because I have kids, or I'm not going to want to take a client to a basketball game because I'm a woman. You know, just don't assume anything.
There's a question. Nice one. Yeah, there's a question coming in from the audience that I'd like to ask, which is, you know, what advice would you, and it's coming from, what advice would you give a female who is leading a male sales force? So you're the woman in charge, and it's all guys underneath you. And what advice would anybody give in that regards?
That's mostly what I'm doing today. Are you the same, Jen?
Yes, me too. I'm the only female, although I just interviewed a female BDR this morning, so I'm so excited.
Good. What advice do you guys have?
I don't know. I think I would need a little bit more context of, I mean, I just like the advice that we just gave about just treating people like people and being professional. That's what I do. I don't think I would treat a female salesperson different from a male salesperson. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know, Tony, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah. No, I feel the same. Just like the last answer. You know, I have on my team we have 11. All are male but one, but we just hired your second female, so I'm excited for that. But and all are not only males, but almost every single one of them is older than me as well. I think just like anything, one, don't make assumptions about them, but also don't feel any kind of way. If you come into the situation saying like, oh, I don't know if they're going to respect me because I'm a woman and they're men, that's going to bring awkwardness into it. If you're just like, hey, I'm in this position, you're in this position, I have respect for what you do, I need you to help me if we're going to make these numbers, and just treat everyone like you would want to be treated. I think it's more about person to person. You know, some of the men on my team are more sensitive than others. Some of them I know I need to be harder on and who I can be super direct with. There are others that I need to be a little more encouraging. They get, you know, discouraged if I'm too assertive or too direct with them. So I think it's more just a human-to-human thing, knowing your team and how to relate to each one of them individually. Can you still hear us, Richard?
Sorry, my computer's telling me it's about to run out of battery, so here, it's plugged in. Yeah, so another question, you know, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in pursuing a sales career, but they're currently in account management? And this question is coming from a woman, so I want to sort of preface it that way.
I would say that that's a great source of women on sales teams, is to come from other teams and other departments. We've seen people in finance moving over to sales, and marketing. What do you think, Jen or Tony?
So my advice depends on a lot of things, but I would say it's probably going to be a little bit harder to go to a different company and get a sales role. So I would go to your manager and tell them how you feel. I'm really interested in moving into sales. I love the position I'm in, but I think this is the direction I want to go for X, Y, and Z reasons. Do you think that's possible in the company? And I would start speaking with that manager's blessing to multiple stakeholders in your organization, try to get moved over there. Once you get the support of the success or account management team, start to talk to the leader of sales, take them out to lunch, and ask questions about what would it take to get me there. And if you have to go to another company, you probably will have to start in the SDR role, which may feel like you're taking a step back, but you're not. The SDR role very much prepares you to be successful in an account executive role. I think it's a very valuable position. That might be the path that you have to go down.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Is something else that I can add? I think that's great advice.
Just do it.
Do it. Do it.
I think, oh, we lost Richard.
Did we lose Richard?
Right.
We lost our moderator.
I'm taking over. All right, I'm going to take some questions from the audience.
Who has a question? Actually, one thing I'll say while we're waiting for questions that I feel pretty strongly about, I thought the data from this report was really interesting. Women interrupt men more often and talk longer on calls, but still close more deals in this particular study. And I think the qualitative side, the data is one piece of it, and it's important to use that. And I do think the statistical relevance is something. But at the end of the day, it's always about the qualitative side. I think you can't have one without the other. If you try to coach just based on how you feel, that's not effective. If you try to coach just based on the numbers, though, and say, okay, to the female who's talking more, you need to talk less, maybe that is the right answer. So I think the qualitative side of coaching, and that's why I like the Gong platform so much for new users, is that you can look at the data and what it says, but then drill down into calls and start to really understand what you want to coach on and how you can improve.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
These are two or three parameters out of probably 40 or 50 that make an impact. None of them can be captured, and there's the lyrics and there's the music. Okay, and that's what you hear in the voice. You know, just the tone, the emotions. That it's always, you can't just look at the numbers. You have to listen carefully and understand the meaning. And as you said, what was said, what's the body language. Everything plays into place. So the fact that you're talking more.
Very exciting. I'm sorry. I was going to say it's very exciting that this technology is happening because we're going to learn a lot more as we go on.
Lori, you interrupted me, but I agree with you.
I have made it back. I apologize. It was very unprofessional of me to sort of just have my computer die even though it's plugged in. But thank you all for making.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. So I think we're sort of at the end of the hour, unless there was something that I missed that people wanted to continue talking about. Was there anything else anybody else wanted to bring up that we haven't talked about?
I think we made some great final points, Richard, unless you have any final questions from the audience.
I wouldn't know. I had to dial in on my phone, so I apologize to the audience. It's scrambling.
Well, if any future questions or additional questions, I'm sure all 4 or 5 of us would be more than happy to answer, so hit us up on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Please.
Yep.
Please reach out to these people. These people know their stuff, for lack of a better word, and I've known them all for a while now and can tell you that not only are they very smart at what they do, they're also good people, which is also very nice to have in a business world, in the business environment. So I want to thank everybody for joining us on the webinar today. I also want to thank Gong for sponsoring this webinar, and to Toni and Jen and Lori, thank you all so much for your insights and sharing your feedback and being so open about a topic that I think many people are afraid still to talk about, and I'm glad we were able to have a good conversation around it. So thank you all.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, everybody.